Hi there. So for the next story time, I'm doing something different. I'm going to endeavor to read Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. Now, this was written in like 1889 or something. It's very old. And I have the book, which, if you look at this, it's just... And I can't read this book because the letters are absolutely microscopic. Crazy. And this is public domain, so you can, do whatever I want with it. But it's 32 chapters, and I'm not sure how long the chapters are. We may get through 1 or 2 chapters a day. But this may take, 20 episodes or so to get through it. Then after that, I have Ingersoll Lockwood's next book, 1900 or The Last President. And then we'll go through that one next. So it'll be a marvelous journey. And I'll show you. And since I can't read the type on these little tiny print, I got the Kindle version, which means I can share it with you. It has some really good illustrations in it that date way back too. Ingersoll Lockwood was an attorney, which is interesting that he would write. These were considered children's books, but after, since the main character is Baron Trump, it obviously got a lot of attention, and people tried to make a lot out of it. Is there anything to it? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe not. I know Baron Trump in the book was very short of stature, and Baron Trump of today is very tall. So, but we'll begin this. Okay. Only authentic portrait of William Heinrich Sebastian von Trump from the oil painting. Okay. Baron von Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey by Ingersoll Lockwood. Illustrated by Charles Howard Johnson. Okay. Now this is forward, and we'll read the forward. Okay. Biographical notice of Wilhelm Heinrich Sebastian von Trump, commonly called Little Baron Trump. As doubting Thomases seem to take particular pleasure in popping up on all occasions, Jack-in-the-Box like, it may well be to head them off in this particular instance by proving that Baron Trump was a real baron and not a mere baron of the mind. The family was originally French Huguenot de la Trompe, which often, the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, took refuge in Holland, where its head assumed the name of Vander Trump, just as many other of the French Protestants rendered their names into Dutch. Some years later, upon the invitation of the Elector of Brandenburg, Nicholas Vander Trump became a subject of that prince, and purchased a large estate in the province of Pomerania, again changing his name, this time to von Trump, the little baron, so called from his diminutive stature, was born sometime in the latter part of the 17th century. He was the last of his race in the direct line, although cousins of his are today well-known Pomeranian gentry. He began his travels at an incredibly early age and filled his castle with such strange objects picked up here and there in the faraway corners of the world that the simple-minded peasantry came to look upon him as half bigwig and half magician. Hence the growth of the many myths and fanciful stories concerning the indefatigable globetrotter. Indefatigable. The date of his death cannot be fixed with any certainty, but this much may be said. Among the portraits of Pomeranian notables hanging in the Rathaus at Stettin, there is one picturing a man of low stature and with a head much too large for his body. He is dressed in some outlandish costume and holds in his left hand a grotesque image in ivory, most elaborately carved. The broad face is full of intelligence, and the very large gray eyes are lighted up with a good-natured but quizzical look that invariably attracts attention. The man's right hand rests upon the back of a dog sitting on the table and looking straight out with an air of dignity that shows that he knew he was sitting for his portrait. If a visitor asks the guide who this man is, he always gets the answer, "Oh, that's the little baron." But little baron who? That's the question. Why, it may not be May it not be the famous William Heinrich Sebastian von Trump, commonly called the Little Baron, and his wonderful dog, Bulger? Okay. And we'll look at the... See, there's the painting again. Don't know what he's holding in his hand. This is fiction. So, and you can see the chapters. There are 32 of them. It just never ends. So, illustrations. Okay, chapter 1. We'll see how far we get. Bulger was not himself at all, dear friends. There was a lackluster look in his eyes, and his tail responded with only a half-hearted wag when I spoke to him. I say half-hearted, for I always had a notion that the other end of Bulger's tail was fastened to his heart. His appetite, too, had gone down with his spirits, and he rarely did anything more than sniff at the dainty food which I set before him. Although I tried to tempt him with fried chickens, livers, and toasted coxcombs, 2 of his favorite dishes. There was evidently something on his mind, and yet it never occurred to me what that something was. For to be honest about it, it was something which, of all things, I never should have dreamed of finding there. Possibly I might have discovered at an earlier day what it was all about, had it not been that just at this time I was very busy, too busy, in fact, to pay much attention to anyone, even to my dear 4-footed foster brother. As you may remember, dear friends, my brain is a very active one, and when once I become interested in a subject, Castle Trump itself might take fire and burn until the legs of my chair had become charred before I would hear the noise and confusion or even smell the smoke. It so happened at the time of Bulger's low spirits that the elder Baron had, through the kindness of an old school friend, come into possession of a 15th century manuscript from the pen of no less celebrated thinker and philosopher than the learned Spaniard Don Constantino Bartolomeo, I'm not going to say that word, yeah, right. Commonly known among scholars as Don Fum, entitled A World Within a World. In this work, Don Fum advanced this wonderful theory that there is a very reason to believe that the interior of our world is inhabited, that, as is well known, this vast earth ball is not solid, on the contrary, being in many places quite hollow, that ages and ages ago terrible disturbances had taken place on its surface and had driven the inhabitants to seek refuge in the vast underground chambers, so vast, in fact, as well to merit the name World Within a World. This book, with its crumpled, torn, and time-stained leaves, exhaling the odors of vaulted crypt and worm-eaten chest, exercised a peculiar fascination upon me. All day long and often far into the night, I sat poring over its musty and mildewed pages, quite forgetful of the surface world, and with the plummet of thoughts sounding these subterranean depths, and with the eye and ear of fancy visiting them, and gazing upon and listening to the dwellers therein. While I would be thus engaged, Bulger's favorite position was on a quaintly embroidered leather cushion, brought from the Orient by me on one of my journeys, and now placed at the end of my work table nearest the window. From this point of vantage, Bulger commanded a full view of the park and the terrace and of the drive leading up to the porte cochere. Nothing escaped his watchful eye. He sat there hour by hour, amusing himself by noting the comings and goings of all sorts of folk, from the hawkers and gewgaws to the noblest people in the shire. One day my attention was attracted by his suddenly leaping down from his cushion and giving a low growl of displeasure. I paid little heed to it, but to my surprise, the next day, about the same hour, it occurred again. My curiosity was now thoroughly aroused, and laying down Don Fum's musty manuscript, I hastened to the window to learn the cause of Bulger's irritation. Lo, the secret was out. There stood a half-dozen mongrel curs, belonging to the tenantry of the baronial lands, looking up to the window, and by their barking and antics and endeavoring to entice Bulger out for a romp. Dear friends, I need to show you that such familiarity was extremely distasteful to Bulger. Their impudence was just little more than he could stand. Ringing my bell, I directed my servant to hunt them away, whereupon Bulger consented to resume his seat by the window. The next morning, just as I settled myself down for a good long read, I was almost startled by Bulger bounding into the room with his eyes flashing fire and teeth laid bare in anger. Laying hold of the skirt of my dressing gown, he gave it quite a savage tug, which meant, "Put thy book aside, little master, and follow me." I did so. He led me down the stairs, across the hallway, and into the dining room. And then this new cause of discontent on his part became very apparent to me. The group around his silver breakfast plate sat an ancient tabby cat and 4 kittens, all calmly licking or lapping away at his breakfast. Looking up into my face, he uttered a sharp, complaining howl, as much as to say, "There, little master, look at that. Isn't that enough to roil the patience of a saint? Canst thou wonder that I am not happy with all these disagreeable things happening to me? I tell thee, little master, it is too much for flesh and blood to put up with." And I thought so too, and did all my power to comfort my unhappy little friend, but judge of my surprise upon reaching my room and directing him to take his place upon the cushion, to see him refuse to obey. It was something extraordinary, and set me to thinking. He noticed this and gave a joyful bark, then dashed into my sleeping apartment. He was gone for several moments, and then returned bearing in his mouth a pair of oriental shoes, which he laid at my feet. Again and again he disappeared, coming back each time with some article of clothing in his mouth. In a few moments he had laid a complete oriental costume on the floor before my eyes. And would you believe me, dear friends, it was the identical suit which I had worn on my last travels in faraway lands, when he and I had been wrecked on the island of Gogula, the land of the round bodies. What did it all mean? Why, this, to be sure. "Little master, canst thou not understand why thy dear Bulger? He is weary of this dull and spiritless existence. He is tired of this increasing familiarity on the port of these mongrel curs, and the neighborhood of the audacity of these kitchen tabbies and their families. He implores thee to break away from this life of reverie and inaction, and for the honor of the trumps to be up and away again." Stooping down and winding away my arms around my dear Bulger, I cried out, "Yes, I understand thee now, faithful companion, and I promise thee that before this moon has filled her horns, we shall once more turn our backs on Castle Trump, up and away in search of the portals of Don Fum's world within a world." Upon hearing these words, Bulger broke out into the wildest, maddest barking, bounding hither and thither as if the very spirit of mischief had suddenly nestled in his heart. In the midst of these mad gambols, a low rap on my chamber door caused me to call out, "Peace, peace, good Bulger. Someone knocks. Peace, I say." It was the elder Baron. With a somber mien and stately tread he advanced and took a seat beside me on the canopy. "Welcome, honored father," I exclaimed as I took his hand and raised it to my lips. "I was upon the very point of seeking thee out." He smiled and then said, "Well, little Baron, what thinkest thou of Don Fum's world within a world?" "I think, my lord," was my reply, "that Don Fum is right, that such a world must exist, and with thy consent it is my intention to set out in search of its portals, with all safe haste, and as soon as my dear mother, the gracious Baroness, may be able to bring her heart to part with me." The elder Baron was silent for a moment, and then added, "Little Baron, much as thy mother and I shall dread to think of thy being again out from under the safe protection of this venerable roof, the moss-grown tiles of which have sheltered so many generations of the Trumps, must we not be selfish in this matter. Heaven forbid that such a thought should move our souls to stay thee. The honor of our family, thy fame as an explorer of strange lands and faraway corners of the globe, call unto us to be strong-hearted. Therefore, my dear boy, make ready and go forth once more in search of great new marvels. The learned Don Fum's chart will stand thee by a like and safe and trusty counselor. Remember, little Baron, the motto of the Trumps. Per ardua ad astra, the pathway to glory is strewn with pitfalls and dangers. But the comforting thought shall ever be mine, that when thy keen intelligence fails, Bulger's inerrant instinct will be there to guide thee." As I stooped to kiss the elder Baron's hand, the gracious Baroness entered the room. Bulger hastened to raise himself upon his hind legs and lick her hand in a token of respectful greeting. The tears were pressing hard against her eyelids, but she kept them back, and encircling my neck with her loving arms, she pressed many and many a kiss upon my cheeks and brow. "I know what it all means, my dear son," she murmured, with the saddest of smiles. "But it never shall be said that Gertrude Baroness von Trump stood in the way of her son adding new glories to the family scutcheon. Go, go, little Baron, and heaven bring thee safely back to our arms and to our hearts in its own good time." At these words, Bulger, who had been listening to the conversation with picked up urn, and glistening eyes, gave one long howl of joy, and then springing into my lap, covered my face with kisses. This done, he vented his happiness in a string of ear-splitting barks and a series of the maddest gambols. It was one of the happiest and proudest days of his life, for he felt that he exerted considerable influence in screwing to the sticking point of my resolution to set out on my travels once again. And now, the patter of hurrying feet and the loud murmur of anxious voices resounded through the castle corridors, while inside and out, ever and anon, I could hear the cry, now whispered and now outspoken. The little baron is making ready to leave home again. Bulger ran hither and thither, surveying everything, taking note of all the preparations, and I could hear his joyous bark ring out as some familiar article used by me on my former journeys was dragged from its hiding place. 20 times a day my gentle mother came to my room to repeat the good counsel or reiterate some valuable caution. It seemed to me that I had never seen her so calm, so stately, so lovable. She was very proud of my great name, and so, in fact, were every man, woman, and child in the castle. Had I not gotten off as I did, I should have been literally killed with kindness, and Bulger slain with sweet cake. There you go. Well, that's 15 minutes. Yes. So we'll stop there, and we will continue with Chapter 2 next time. I'll put a bookmark right there. So, I hope you'll follow these. It'll take a while to get through it. I have never read it myself, so I'm looking forward to it as well. Until next time, Chapter 2, that was the foreword in Chapter 1 from Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. We'll continue with Chapter 2 next time. See ya.